Welcome. Glad to see people jumping on. Hi, Rachel Ravy. Got your earrings on. Great to see people. Come on in. Welcome. I'm really excited today to talk about finding our truth. It's something that I've had just a challenge with, right? Really discerning my own truth. And I think that's probably why I teach it. I seem to teach the things that I'm learning and exploring in my own life. So we're going to work with truth today and what it means to discern our truth and then live our truth. Hi, Margaret from Alaska. Love to see you here. Yeah, I'd love to hear where people are from. Where are you connecting from today? Super curious. This is going to be recorded too. So if you want to listen to it later or you have some people that might benefit from hearing this, you can certainly, we'll get a recording out to you tomorrow and you can send it on. North Carolina, Grundy Center, Iowa. I love it, Lori. Hi, Carolyn. Awesome to see you, Maryland. Washington, Sacramento. Hi, Kathy. Great to see you joining. Love to have all of you on with me today. So before we start and sort of dive into the meat of the matter, which today is truth, discerning truth, how truth is always being broadcast to us from our soul. Sometimes it's just the challenge is discerning it, listening to it, following through on it. So before we dive into all of this content, let's take a moment to just settle. Of course, if you're driving or you're at work or somewhere where you can't do this, don't close the eyes. But if you can, all truth, all of our truth is never on the outside. And we instinctively know that, right? Like nothing I tell you today, which is outside of you, is anything even necessarily... I'm going to do something here. Okay, there we go. Even anything I share with you today only is truth to you if it resonates somewhere deep inside. All right? So for all of us, our work, if we want to discern our truth and live our truth, is to keep going in, keep going in, keep going in, keep going in, keep going in. So let's just take a quick moment to get really grounded, to settle in, to soften, and to start to open into more of a state of receptivity. So depending on where you're at today, you might bring your thumb and your pointer finger together like this and ground the hands down on the tops of the thighs. Alternatively, this is always my choice, is that I like to have a hand on my heart. I really feel like my truth resides in my heart. There are other areas of the body that speak truth. So for some of you, it might be more your womb space, or for some people, it's the throat, or more the crown of the head, the third eye area. But if you feel guided to place your hands on your heart, feel free to do that. Let's take a deep breath. And as you exhale, feel your attention move inward and down. And so feeling your attention move inward and down. This is the pathway to truth. We must go in and we must go down. So even in this just very brief grounding and settling, just observing in yourself how efficiently you can let your attention, your awareness drop in and down. Could you pull your attention all the way down into your pelvis where it's connected to the chair or wherever you're sitting, or maybe all the way down to your feet, connecting your feet down into the earth. Plug in. So imagine that through the pelvis or through the feet, you're literally plugging in to the truth, the wisdom, the guidance of Mother Earth. And then take a few breaths to Soften any hard edges that you might observe in yourself. We all have them. And soften the shoulders down away from the ears. Soften the clenched jaw or the tight forehead. Feel this next exhale soften you back a little bit. So we go in, down, and we could even add, we go back a little bit. We surrender back into the unconscious, into the unknown, into the mystery of life. So as you feel yourself a little more grounded, a little more soft, feel also this awareness of opening in a receptive space to anything that you might need to hear today. So opening to the possibility that there might be some idea, some concept, some quote, some inspiration that really resonates with you, that really moves you into a different space. So we stay open, we stay receptive. So let's take a deep breath in. Wherever your hands are, bring them together in front of your heart and take a little bow towards your hands, just honoring this time to connect with truth. And slowly release the hands, open the eyes. So welcome all of you that jumped on while we were centering. Just want to say that if you have questions as we go along, if you can, put them in the Q&A box. I've got a couple assistants that are watching, and I'll reserve time at the end to get to those questions. So feel free, please speak in the chat box. But if you have specific questions, it's easier for us to find them if you put them in that Q&A box. So let's dive in. So we're going to be working with how we can trust our truth, how we can really settle into this permission to be who we are. So this is our masterclass for this Wisdom Wednesday. So this is who I am. I know many of you have worked with me or do work with me, but I know there's a lot of people that could be new. So these are the different roles. This isn't really actually who I am. We're going to talk about that in a moment. These are just simply the roles that I live out, at least right now in this phase of my life. They'll likely change because that's the part of truth. It's always morphing and changing. One of my assistants said, you need to add something new to this list. And so I think if I were to add something new, I'm also the mother of a new driver who also happens to have a new girlfriend. So this, if I feel a little more stressed out or overwhelmed, that might be part of it. So over the years, I've spent a lot of time contemplating and honing sort of like, what is my dharma? Like, what is my bigger purpose? What am I here to do? And again, dharma is a big concept. Maybe one will do a Wisdom Wednesday on sometime, but I've really honed in on this integration of yoga and psychology, that I have this training, 20 years of experience as a psychologist, about 16 years as a yoga meditation teacher, and I really see the power of blending these two modalities. I feel like they're you bring them together, and the integration of the two makes them even more powerful. So this is what I really seek to do in all of my trainings, my teachings, how I teach yoga, etc., how I work with clients. There's a bunch of ways you can connect with me. I do a Wisdom Wednesday, the first Wednesday of every month. We do a little talk like we're going to do today. I've got free Saturday morning yoga. You can always join that. I've got a podcast. I've got an upcoming program called Reclaim. I'm going to talk a little bit more about at the end. I do a yoga certification for therapists, for yoga teachers, called Yoga for the Mind. That's in February. And then I've got 3 retreats. I don't normally teach 3 in 1 year, but it's just how it goes. Guatemala in January, Costa Rica in May, and Ireland next September. So if you're curious about doing some traveling, it's one of my favorite things. So this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a lot about the second half of life, what threatens our truth, how to read your truth, why following rules is overrated, one of my favorite teachings that I'll be excited to share with you because I followed the rules for a very long time. And still do to some extent, but we're going to talk in more depth about this. The power of individuating, and finally, how do we even start to discern our truth? So Shakespeare said it best, to thine own self be true. This idea for me has always resonated really deeply, and I could come up with a lot of stories right now as to why that is, but I'm also going to say there's some mystery around why I've always felt so strongly about this necessity of being true to the self. So I have three children, 17, 14, and 10, and I don't know why this started, but it started with my first, so 17 years ago. I think I had read something somewhere, but I started to whisper in the baby's ear, all three of my children, when I would put them down for a nap or I would put them to bed or they would be asleep. I would whisper in their ears, "Be who you are. Be who you are. Be who you are." And actually brings some emotion to me right now as I sit in that for a moment, the realization of how often I said that to all three of my children. I think probably, again, here's the story that I've created, but I think part of the reason that I did that is I was trying to speak to myself as I think about my 30s and sort of being lost in the idea, the role of being a mother and a wife and what it meant, and also all the sort of things that you learn growing up and in our culture about what it means to be a good person and be successful. All of that was really swirling for me in my 30s, and it would come to a head in my 40s. So I think there was probably some good foreshadowing here, to follow Shakespeare, about me whispering this in my baby's ears for all those years about be who you are. So that big question of like, who am I think it hits many of us around midlife. And there's this really powerful concept that we have two lives. We have the first half of our life, which is one life, and then we have a second half to the life. And the great Carl Jung, one of my primary teachers, psychologist in the 1920s, really has created a lot of seminal thinking around consciousness. He has said that during the second half of life, our task is to be neither well-adjusted or normal. I love that. But our task is to be ourselves. So I do think there comes a point in everyone's life where you start to tap in a little bit deeper to what your own unique thumbprint or energy or offering is to this world. Prior to that, the first half of the life, it's sometimes harder to really sit in that question. It's one of the big, my meditation teacher, Dr. Deepak Chopra, teaches that there's 4 big soul questions that we ask throughout the course of our life. Who am I? What do I want? What is my purpose? And what am I grateful for? So that first question, who am I? It's a really big one that I think it's in our highest interest to really sit with and work with throughout the course of our lives. So I want to talk just a little bit about what do I mean by the first half of life and the second half of life. And many of you might assume that the first half of life is like 0 to 40, right? And the second half of life is 40 to the ending of our life. And, this could be true. This might be what your two halves of your life look like. But it's not necessarily always related to chronological age. So there are certain, we might say, psychological shifts that happen for people much earlier than 40 or even much later than 40, if we take 40 as a midpoint. Examples of that would be a death of a parent or the loss of a relationship, the change in a job, a diagnosis or an illness. These are all things that can propel us out of this first half of life, which is very much focused on ego development. Now, ego is not a bad thing. I would say that pop psychology often gives ego a really bad rap. We talk about busting through the ego, getting rid of the ego. The ego, please don't get rid of your ego. It's so important, right? It helps us get through life. It helps us find work. It helps us wake up in the morning and get our tasks done. Where the ego becomes problematic is when it just functions from an unconscious place, and we lose really track of who we truly are, right? So first half of life is about, being a good citizen, right? Getting a job, raising a family, contributing to society. We have sort of a social contract that we fulfill. Second half of life becomes this emphasis away from this social contract to more discovering our truth. Who am I? Right? What does it mean to be in this life? What am I here to contribute? So this all leads to a question I've asked a lot, and a question that I get asked a lot, like, is the midlife crisis real? Is the midlife crisis real? I think it is, but there's, I would say the data on it, if you look at sort of the psychological data on it, is a bit mixed. What I will tell you is that both men and women across genders report their lowest satisfaction in the midlife years, right? So there's a particular Australian study that says our low point in terms of life satisfaction comes around the age of 45 and is within that 45 to 54 age range, which is right where I am, right? So if we look to the larger reason of why we go through this sort of midlife challenge, I like to call it midlife awakening, is that it's designed to help us let go of the life we created in the first half and transition to the life we're supposed to live. So there's a real reason why we feel exhausted and tired and burned out and, a little bit discontent, right? Searching for something else. It's because these are all signs that, the life you have had, it's over, right? Like you've lived it thoroughly, but you need something else. A new direction is needed. So I'm going to stop the share because I can't see the chat box, and I'm super curious if anyone is saying anything. Okay, feel free to chat and I'll look at it later. So I want to show you this amazing book that I found, and I found this a while ago, and you can tell my copy is very underlined. It's called Hidden Blessings, a Midlife Crisis as Spiritual Awakening. So again, I want you to know that when I'm talking about the second half of life, if you're like, well, I'm not midlife, I'm in my 20s, you might still have had a major psychological awakening that is propelling you into asking these big questions of what's my truth, who am I? So I would say for me, my sort of midlife, what I'm again calling awakening, not crisis, which was the burning of aspects of my ego, the burning down of old roles, old coping strategies, relationships that no longer served me, old ways of being in the world, and definitely old ways of coping. I mean, some of my prime coping mechanisms were perfectionism and pleasing and overdoing and over-efforting, and those definitely came to a screeching halt at a point in my life. So as I read this book, it spoke to me. She talks about these 12 sort of stages that we go through in terms of this midlife. And as I read these 12 stages, they reminded me a lot of the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell laid out in the 1940s, and the heroine's journey, which Maureen Murdoch, a student of Joseph Campbell, really sort of expounded upon about 40 years later. And when I started to, I was trying to remember, like, why did I get back into the hero's journey or the heroine's journey? It was the start of the pandemic, and I had watched a really amazing movie on Joseph Campbell and how he, traveled all over and studied all these different cultures and found this similarity in terms of this archetype of the hero. So I want to talk a little bit about this archetype of the hero because I think it's something, or actually I know it's something that we're all drawn towards. So here's my daughter and I dressing up as Wonder Woman. Clearly we are trying to embody the heroine. And then I couldn't leave out my cute boys. Also dressing up, right, as heroes. So there's something about the hero and the heroine that, again, we all really are drawn to. What is that? Well, the hero and the heroine both really represent feminine power and masculine power, right? It's the icon of, feminine and masculine power. And what does the hero's journey look like? Well, let's actually talk for a moment. The word archetype, most of you may know it. It's really out there in the vernacular now, but an archetype is an energy. It's a sort of psychological, emotional energy It's sometimes called an archetype, an architect of our life. It really shapes how we respond to our life. And we will inhabit, or the archetype will inhabit us, many types of archetypes throughout the course of a life, right? So there might be a phase in your life where you're really inhabiting the mother archetype, and then later you are more inhabiting the teacher archetype, or you might have multiple archetypes being sort of moving through your body at one time. So in terms of the hero, well, actually, let me show you this. Here are there are endless, by the way, numbers of archetypes. They are not just 12, but here are sort of 12 big ones that show up in movies and books, the sage, the creator, the caregiver, the outlaw, the magician. So those are some examples of archetypes. And I also want to just point out, where does the archetype reside in us? So above this sort of halfway line here is our conscious mind. And below the halfway line is our unconscious. And a big part of our unconscious is our personal unconscious, which contains the aspects of ourself that we're embarrassed by, or we don't want to look at, or we push away, we repress, we don't have the time to deal with. Also in that personal unconscious, and this is really important, also the really positive qualities, our genius, our wisdom, our truth. It all lies in the unconscious, right? And a part of the unconscious is something called this collective unconscious. And this is something that we actually inherit. It's not something we create. It's inherited sort of in our DNA. This is, again, the work of Carl Jung, the theory of Carl Jung. And so in this collective unconscious are all these archetypal energies. And again, some really shine up, get shiny in our life. They show up, they move through us at various points in time. So here is the hero. So if we stay with the hero, the heroine, here's sort of the journey that Joseph Campbell laid out. There are sort of 4 big categories. The first is you're called to some kind of change or adventure. Then the second category is you have to go through a lot of ordeal. It's challenging, right? There's an initiation point. Then we go through sort of this transformation. We really start to change. And then we come back out. We return to our life a new person, a changed person. So this is sort of the classic hero's journey. This is different than the heroine's journey. I'm going to talk about the heroine's journey in a moment, but I wanted to at least bring this up. So I want to call your attention to stage 3 here, or step 3, which is the refusal. I want to speak to this because I firmly believe that we all refuse the call. I think there are many times in our life when there is archetypal energy, or there is a force beyond us that is really pushing us to make a change, to expand, to grow, to become someone different. Like the life we've lived is become too small. Jung once said that we walk in shoes that are too small for us. And I think that happens to every single one of us. That growing pain that hits us, that call to shift and to change, we often don't listen to it. We refuse it. We're too busy. We have an awareness it's going to be too painful. I don't want to do this. So we're going to talk here in a moment. Why do we refuse it? We have to name it, I feel like, and shine the light on us for us to be able to recognize, oh, I keep refusing the call. So the heroine. So we talked about that classic hero's journey. The heroine's journey is just slightly different. And Maureen Murdoch is the woman who looked at Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and said, I think this is really right on for men, but I'm not sure it works for women. So based on her 20 years of clinical experience as a therapist, she created what she calls the heroine's journey. And she got the approval of Joseph Campbell. She was a student of Campbell's. And he said she might be onto something. The task of the heroine is different. The hero has to go out into the world and slay the outer dragons. The heroine is totally different. She has to go in. She has to go in and down, just like we did when I did that initial grounding with you. We have to bring our awareness in and down, and then we have to reclaim ourselves. Because of living in a patriarchy, we have both moved away from our own inner feminine and our inner masculine. So there's this journey of having to heal our inner feminine, heal our inner masculine, and then see about how they can come together in a marriage and an integration, which allows us to really tap into what our truth is. This is the task of the heroine. But we can refuse the call, as I just said. We can say, not for me, not going there. I like a life of sort of ease and a little bit of numbness and just watching my Netflix and not having to think too much about this. So I really actually, although my attitude didn't sound like that, I really don't have judgment for people who refuse the call. It's just life, right? We all have options. We all have choices. But I do believe we evolve the most in our lifetime if we are willing to work with those calls that come from the unconscious mind. In fact, Jung has said that sort of the greatest sin in life is refusing to acknowledge the unconscious mind, right? So it's ignoring the call of the unconscious. He called that the greatest sin of life. So why do we refuse the call, right? Like we get the nudge, something needs to change. You're stuck, it's not working, we refuse the call. So there's two main reasons we refuse the call. At least in my perception, there may be more. But the first one is fear, right? We're just simply scared. And I just want to acknowledge that fear is super unavoidable, right? We're all wired to feel fear, but we feel a lot more fear than we're necessarily wired to feel. So let me explain that. When we're born, when we come into these infant bodies, all babies are wired to fear two things. They're wired to fear loud noises, and they're also wired to fear falling. So loud noises and falling. Every other fear that we're carrying around as baggage in our life is a fear that we've been conditioned into or we've learned somewhere along the way, right? So most of our fear, again, is something that is manufactured by our mind rather than physiologically wired into our bodies. So the big fears that show up, and I experience all of these, so if you're like, yep, you're not alone. It's fear of disappointing people, fear of embarrassment, fear of rejection, fear of people saying bad things about you, judgment, fear of being isolated, fear of being abandoned. So our fear shows up as worry, it shows up as rumination, it shows up as insomnia, it shows up as having a short fuse. And fear definitely rips us not only from freedom, but it definitely rips us from our truth. Because if we're going to go on this heroine's journey and seek to find what our truth is, we're going to come across fear. It's just a known part of the process, right? It's just a part of the deal. So knowing that the fear is going to happen and living through it, being with it, and knowing it's part of the course is what we have to come to grips with, right? We can spend a life avoiding fear, but then we're definitely not going to be able to live or be in alignment with our truth. And I would say some of the phrases that to me look like fear and that I say to myself regularly is, be careful. You don't know about that. You might get hurt. You don't know how that's going to turn out. Are you sure you want to do that, Betsy? Yeah, are you sure? You can't really do that. It's not really your thing. Who do you think you are, right? This is all the voice of fear sort of taking over our decision making. And then, of course, we also have the stepsister of lethargy, right? So fear definitely disconnects us from our truth, but lethargy also is a big disconnector. And lethargy, to me, looks like there's just like a numbness. There's an avoidance. We feel sort of flat, indifferent, apathetic. We don't know where to even find the energy to go in and down, right? I don't even know what that looks like. I'm too tired I've got too much going on. There's no way I can work the process of going in and down to really discover my truth. So it almost feels like a big obligation that we can never reach. So these are sort of the two main reasons that we say, And I will say it's at an unconscious level. We say no to the call. There's a call to step into something bigger. And you know what is so important to add here? Our soul, this call from the soul, is never leading us somewhere worse than where we are. It's always trying to guide us somewhere better. It's always trying to take us to a more expansive, beautiful space. So we have to know that we are going to doubt ourselves. We're going to be in fear. We're going to, want to bury our head in the sand or under our big duvet cover and, eat some Ben and Jerry's. That's going to happen. But it's not what we're here for, right? We are here. Each of us is here. Each of us is here to really expand and to step into our truth. So if we do decide, okay, I'm going to take this call. I do feel like I need some transformation. Where do we find our truth? Like, where even is the truth? And as I guided you in and down, that was a signal. The truth is in and down. So this image of the iceberg, many of you have seen this. This represents the mind. Above the surface is our conscious mind. It's a very small part of how we move through the world. So yes, the conscious mind makes decisions and analyzes and ruminates and controls and plans. This is all functions of the conscious mind. But the unconscious mind also guides us. It also makes decisions. It also sort of takes us on a path, but we're just not aware of it. But what I want to say is the power of your unconscious mind, all of that iceberg underneath the surface, do not underestimate it, my friends. Do not underestimate the power of your unconscious mind. Now, all the contemplative practices, so what I mean by that is yoga, meditation, psychotherapy, journaling, all the real deep healing practices are designed to make the unconscious conscious, right? So to bring the water level down so that we have more access to what's underneath the surface. And again, until Jung has said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life and we will call what's happening in our life fate. We'll just say, well, that was fate. Was it? Or was it your unconscious directing your life? You just weren't willing to become conscious of it. So the beauty of the unconscious mind, I think of it as beautiful, is that it talks to us. It tries to get our attention. The unconscious mind, we can also call it our wise mind. We can call it our soul. It's constantly trying to get our attention. And so if we ignore it, or if we cover up under the covers and decide not to heed the call, what happens? Well, the unconscious mind is going to continue to send us messages. It's going to continue to try to initiate us, to call us into transformation, towards growth, towards evolution. We're all here to evolve as human beings. So how does the unconscious speak to us? Well, the first way it comes through is dreams. Now, I'm curious about how many people actually remember their dreams, because for many of us, we don't even remember our dreams. We think, well, I don't remember any dreams. There are some real tips and tools for how to remember dreams. And when you remember your dreams, oh my goodness, the storehouse of guidance and wisdom that comes through is really phenomenal. I'll talk about that in a bit. So in addition to dreams, symptoms are signs from the unconscious to wake us up, to direct us towards something different, to release the life we had for something that's different, that's better, that's more healthy. So these symptoms can show up as physical manifestations, illness, diagnoses. It can show up as mental, emotional. It can show up as addictions. The unconscious also comes to us in the form of accidents and synchronicities as well. So things that seem beyond our control, but if we look a little bit deeper into it, there seems to be some message in it. So for me, again, my midlife awakening started at about 40. I'm 48, so I'm 8 years into it, and maybe according to the woman who wrote the book on midlife, it can be about 12 years. Maybe I have 4 more to go, perhaps. We'll see. I've been doing the hard work. I've been trying to make my unconscious conscious for sure. But I would say prior to 40, I would delve under the surface, but not very deep. I was a oh shit meditator, meaning that I would meditate when things were bad. But I didn't meditate on a regular basis, which is one of the most powerful tools as a way to really connect to your subconscious or unconscious mind. So for me, I got almost all of these signals because I really wasn't listening to my unconscious, and it definitely was trying to direct me in a different direction. So I got physical symptoms. I started to develop autoimmune problems. I got emotional symptoms. I had brain fog. I had anxiety. I had some panic. I came face to face with what my addictions were. I was definitely addicted to perfectionism and people pleasing. I was addicted to doing everything right? And those were definitely stymieing me. They were slowing me down. Because of all of this stir up in my life, a beautiful synchronicity happened. I was reading a newsletter. I don't even remember who the newsletter was from, but they were quoting a woman named Kathy Pagano. And I was moved by what Kathy Pagano had said. She is a Jungian analyst. She's a dream analyst. And she also is an astrologer. So I got on her website and I was like, wow, she was speaking about, I'm remembering this now, she's speaking about midlife transitions. I reached out to her, kind of said, I'm going through something. I started to work with her for almost 6 years on dream analysis. So for 6 years, I recorded my dreams. I analyzed my dreams. I listened to what my dreams were telling me, completely transformational in my life. And what I learned is that dreams are very symbolic. Sometimes what the dream looks like on the surface is not at all what it's trying to speak to us about. But if you start a regular conversation with your dreams, it's unbelievable the amount of information that is in those dreams for you to evolve. Now, one of the things I had to come face to face with as I started to listen more to my unconscious is that I had been living a life where I was following all the rules. I thought I was doing everything right. I thought I was being a good wife and a good mother and a good worker and a good daughter. And yet, my false idea was that if I do it all right, if I don't make any mistakes, then I'll come to a place of well-being. And instead, where I found myself was a place of deep illness and not feeling myself or living my truth at all. So part of what I had to come to terms with is that some of my rule following, some of my prescription or my following of all the stories that I had been fed by well-meaning teachers and family members and culture and church and all of that were actually keeping me in a place of contraction. They weren't really allowing me to shine, to grow, to be my unique self. So I came across a teaching somewhere early in my midlife awakening, early 40s. Well, before I get to that, let me read this. I forgot I had put this in here. James Hollis, beautiful book, by the way, Living an Examined Life, writes that most of us were raised to be nice, to fit in, to not promote ourselves. And this somehow got translated as self-abnegation, self-criticism, and self-avoidance. It is not narcissistic to become. It is a duty. But whoever heard this in their childhood? Very few, if any. So it is not, I love that line, it is not narcissistic to become, to step into our greatness, our light, our uniqueness, our truth, how we're supposed to serve. That is not narcissistic. It is a duty. It is a calling for each of us to step into that truth. And we can refuse the call over and over and over and over and over and over again. And the unconscious is going to keep nudging us. And often the signals and the signs get louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. So for me, I had to really come to terms with that some of the rules I had been following, or the rules I had told myself about what a good life looks like, weren't working anymore. And this teaching for me became very significant. And it's a teaching I've shared many times. It comes from a text called the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. And it's one of the oldest yoga texts. There's about three really old texts on Hatha Yoga. It's one of them. And this text talks about there are 6 impediments, or 6 things that will slow you down on the path of yoga. And we could also talk about what it means is there are 6 things that will slow you down in your journey of evolution. If you are here, we're all here to evolve, to grow, right? There are 6 things that will slow you down. So the first 4 on this list, I think, are actually really, they make sense, right? They're sort of like, yeah, makes sense. They're straightforward. Overeating, overexertion, talkativeness, so talking too much. It's a great expenditure of energy. And unsteadiness. So those 4, I think, on the surface make sense. These next 2 are a little more unique. So let me just delve for a moment into the company of common people. So this is not necessarily encouraging you to be a snob or to be greater than thou and say, well, this is a common person, I'm not going to spend time with them. What this teaching means is that actually everyone is uncommon. There's no such thing as a common person. We're all unique. We're all different. We are all here for a unique calling. My calling is different than anyone else's in this world, right? Your calling is different than anyone else's in this world. And so the only common people are those who are refusing the call, right? They don't have the courage. They have not yet worked through their fear and their lethargy to move towards their truth. That's the common person. So if we spend a lot of time with people also with the cover over their heads, not willing to listen to the call, follow the call, move through fear, move through lethargy, there's more likelihood that we also won't become the unique human being that we're meant to, especially in this second half of life. Now, the 6th one, this is the one that really lit up for me, is following the rules. Now, following the rules in terms of how this text talks about it doesn't mean that we have the right to go out and vandalize things or break laws or harm people, be dangerous in any way, shape, or form. Basically, it means that we need to guard against sort of the rules, internal rules we've created, the shoulds, the must, the stories that we've somehow picked up along the way. And these 6 impediments are assuming that we're following what's called the 8 limbs of yoga. And I'm not going to go into any detail about this, but basically those 8 limbs are teaching us how to be in a life of honesty and truthfulness and nonviolence and clarity and cleanliness. And so if we're living those, then the rules, if we're living those things, we're not going to break laws, but we may have to question, does this rule work for me? So for instance, your rule might be you have this internal rule of, well, I have to stay at this job until I'm 65. I have to stay because that's what people do. They don't retire, or I don't think I have enough money. I need to stay, but my soul is calling me. My soul keeps showing me that there's a life for me in Costa Rica. I'm coughing here, just a minute. My soul is showing me that there's something more, but I must just finish this job. I must just remain in this miserable work condition for a couple more years, right? These are the rules that we place on ourselves that I think this teaching is saying, like, really consider, what have you told yourself you should do, you must do, you ought to do? Question those things. Question what's getting in the way of you being in your truth. So when we start to be able to move through this hero or heroine's journey, we reach a phase where we might consider that we've individuated. And the definition that James Hollis gives individuation is surrendering the life we wanted or expected for that which the soul is calling us toward or calling for. So yeah, I think about the life that I imagined as a young girl. I'm so far from what I imagined my life would be. I never, thought I would be a teacher. I never thought that I would be engaged in yoga, right? I never thought that I would be traveling for work. These are all things that right? My soul is calling me to do, and believe me, I've resisted a lot. I resisted for a very long time. So it's really questioning that maybe our idea of where our life should go is not where our soul is trying to call us. So again, we need discernment. And these are the key tools of discernment: your dreams, your body, your symptoms, right? What symptoms are showing up for you, and accidents, synchronicities that are happening in your life. These are the tools that help us see where our soul is trying to guide us. And then, of course, we can go into deeper tools of meditation, yoga. These are definite tools that guide us into that subconscious realm, which is, again, where our truth lies, where our answers lie. So I want to talk just briefly about a program that I'm starting in a couple weeks, September 19th, so it's coming, called Reclaim. And this definitely came out of my last year of spiritual awakening, of moving into this sort of midlife awakening. About a year ago, I started to realize that I had to do some healing work around my inner feminine. And then that led me, so I did a lot of goddess study and what does this all mean, which led me to realize my inner masculine, these are archetypal energies, was way out of balance as well, and that I needed to heal and work with both of them. They often show up as like inner mother, inner father. Jung would call it the anima and the animus. My dream work, my symptoms, my journaling, all was really guiding me about what I needed to heal and what I needed to reclaim in my own life. So originally I thought I was going to teach some course on the divine feminine. And then as I went through this whole journey in the last year, I realized, oh, no. It's not really just about reclaiming our feminine. Rather, it's reclaiming both and healing our inner feminine and our inner masculine. So the heroine's journey is different than the hero's journey, as I alluded to before. We have to heal our inner feminine, and we have to go in and down to reclaim what is our truth. So it looks a little bit different. So who needs the heroine's journey? Well, on the surface, you're going to think like, well, women need the heroine's journey. And I would say, yeah, it definitely speaks to women. But I think we're at this really interesting point in history where, because of the patriarchal culture we've all grown up in, that there's a big realization that both women and men have really suffered because of this. That it's not just women who need to go in and down and reclaim lost parts, but men need it as much as women. So I really think that the heroine's journey at this point in history is in some ways more relevant than even what Joseph Campbell laid out as the hero's journey. So I think Reclaim is especially relevant to people who are going through a transformation. Again, it can look like relationship, job changes, illness, empty nest. You might retire or be facing some major shift in your work life. Or you might be one of those people who, as I talked about it today, realizes you've kind of had the duvet cover over your head for a while, that you have a lot, like, you know that there's another life calling to you, that or you have a sense that there's something more beautiful or more vibrant or more truthful. That was what I felt really strongly in this last year for myself. It was a lot of challenge for me, but I just knew there's something more truthful for me. This doesn't feel true. The life I'm in right now doesn't feel completely true. There's something more truthful, more authentic for me. So you might be someone who knows that a change would be helpful, but you're like, how do I start? I don't even know what this looks like. This is scary as hell to me. What do I do? This program would also be great for you to have encouragement and guidance and support and networks to really help you see, because again, the end, even though we come out someone different, more authentic at the end, it's always a better place than where we started. So it doesn't mean that there isn't pain and challenge and death. Like, the heroine's journey requires us to allow parts of ourselves, parts of our life to die away. But the end point is always more freedom. The end point is always more truthfulness. The end point is always more expansiveness, more vitality. So what do you get if you join this program with me? And again, someone has asked me, like, well, are you going to do this again? And the way that I teach, it's really interesting for me. I definitely feel sort of like downloads come in, right? Like I knew in the midst of everything I was going through in this past year that there was something about the goddess that wanted to come through. But as I stayed and listened, it kept showing me. I kept being guided towards, no, this is how this course needs to be laid out. So I'm not sure this course will ever be taught again, just because it's so relevant to me right now. I feel it's so relevant to these times, to these changing times. And so I don't know, maybe I'll feel the urge to teach it, but right now I kind of imagine this will be sort of a one-time course. So it's 6 months. We start essentially at the fall equinox. We go until the spring equinox. This feels like a really key period of time because we're going into the darkness. We're going into the depths, right? This is the time to go in and down. There's a weekly meeting every Monday, 5:30 Central Standard Time. In that meeting, there'll be some lecture, exercises, some integration time, time for conversation, 5:30 to 6:30, just an hour. You also have access to all the yoga classes I teach Tuesday morning, Saturday morning. We have a couple Q&A calls. We're doing cacao ceremonies, which I added in because cacao is such a powerful superfood. It's a heart-opening superfood, and it really is helpful at helping us set intention, which is what new moons are about. So we're going to do a ceremony on every new moon. You're going to get a box that's got 6 little separate cacao samples in it. You're going to get a journal. You're going to get other cool stuff in that box that'll arrive for you. And then if you want a little bit more guidance, you can work with me one-on-one, or you can work with me in a small group. So if you feel like I could use some extra support, that's also an option. So here are your different options. You have the basic, which is the course. You have the supportive option, which is group sessions. There'll be 5 of them, 90 minutes, small groups, so they won't be a lot of people. You'll really get to know your cohort. And then the personalized, you get the group, plus you get some one-on-one time with me. So there's a couple bonuses that if you sign up before Saturday, you can also get these free online yoga sessions with me. It's a total of 17 classes. And you can also get my Remind course, which starts mid-October. I've taught Remind. This is sort of my signature course. It's my love of integrating psychology and yoga. It's 8 weeks. A lot of people retake it every year because it comes at the fall, which is a time when people need sort of a recentering, a reconnection to their yoga practice. So I'm teaching it again. There's probably been hundreds of people that have taken it. So if you sign up for Reclaim, you also get this, and it happens on Wednesday nights. It's all recorded. So if you're like, that's too much content, Betsy, it's all saved and you can do it at any time. So I want to end today. I'll leave a little bit of time for questions, but this sort of feels like the big jump from the first half of life to the second half of life. And it does take great courage. I just want to acknowledge what courage it takes to move away from something that you've known to something that feels completely different. But this journey of self-discovery, I'd rather take that than the dull pain of unconsciousness, right? That would last the rest of our lives. So I am a firm believer too, I've learned this over the years, that my own personal healing works best with other people. So not that I haven't done a lot of my own individual work, but I find that when I'm in a cohort, when I'm with a group of like-minded people, when I'm in a group of supportive others, when I realize I'm not alone, this is when my healing just takes sort of a quantum leap forward. So if you realize you're one of those people, or sometimes we have a fear, like sometimes we're like, I don't know if I like people, I don't know if I want to, and you're really the people I want to encourage to think about being engaged with a group, because we learn so much we learn most about ourselves in relationship to other people. I've definitely learned that. So I want to jump into these questions and cover some of these. And if you need to jump off, this will be recorded. And I think that Kimberly, my assistant, is putting in there, if you want to jump on to learning more about Reclaim, she'll put that website in the chat box. So Tammy asks, is yoga a consequence or a discipline? What's with hatha yoga? Hatha is just sort of the generalized term of yoga. There are many, many styles of yoga, more than we could, literally now thousands of styles of yoga. The word yoga just means to unite, to yoke. It's really bringing together the mind and the body. And I would call yoga, would I call it a discipline? Yes, it's not a religion. I would actually call it a psychology, the study of self, right? So what yoga does that I think psychology doesn't do is it integrates the body. So yoga to me feels like a little bit more of a comprehensive understanding. It's definitely older too. Yoga's about 4,000 years old. Yoga, modern psychology is maybe 150 years old. So I would say yoga is more comprehensive. It sort of looks at our body, our mind, our energy, our wisdom, and the power of integrating all of these, healing and clearing these different what are called layers of self or bodies. They call it kosha, the kosha model, where psychology tends to just work with the mind. And so as a psychologist, I was really early in my career. Just a couple of years in, I still had all these school loans that I had to pay off, and I got really disenfranchised with it because I realized I had just learned to work from the neck up. And I knew that there was more to healing than just the mind. I knew that the body had to be brought in as well. And there's a lot of beautiful somatic psychology programs now that weren't really around when I was going to grad school about 25 years ago. And so I then, because I had this PhD in psychology, then I went off and studied into the depths of yoga because I wanted to figure out how we bring the body into healing as well. So I hope that answered that for you, Tammy. Yeah, what if you know you need to make a change, but you can't figure out what the change is? That's so common, not knowing what you're intended to do, so you don't know what direction to go. So this, I would say, is really probably more common than knowing what the change is. So some of us know, like, I need to leave this relationship, or I need to change jobs, or I'm stuck in this area of my life. But for many people, I would say more people, is just like this nagging discontent, like something's missing. Something's a little bit off. I lived in that space for a long time, not knowing. I knew something was off, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what change was required of me. I didn't know what steps to take. And so part of the process, and I would say that's why sometimes the heroine's journey, or this journey through midlife, this change from first half to second half, it's a process. And we don't know how long it's going to take. Our conscious mind it's going to take 6 months. It's going to take a year. You're going to know by this date, right? And I would say the process of listening to our unconscious, we don't know how long it's going to take. So really what I teach is, how can we settle in? How can we be in the process of listening? How can we deduce? How can we pick up signals from our dreams, from our body, from our symptoms, from synchronicities, from symbolism in our life? So I would say, if you're like, I need to make a change, I have no idea what the hell it is, you're also in the right place in terms of just knowing that there's a change that's necessary. So my encouragement to you is just to keep going in and down, in and down, in and down, listening. It'll make its way known when you're ready, when your conscious mind is ready for it. The unconscious mind is much more wise than our conscious mind, FYI. Is sleep truly unconscious or deeply? I call the subconscious and the unconscious similar. Like, I think they're a similar thing. Sleep, so there are actually 7 states of consciousness. We really only think about the first 3 states of consciousness, which are waking, sleeping, and dreaming. So I would say in deep sleep, there is an unconsciousness. There's a disconnect from conscious awareness. But dreaming, there's a lot of mental action and movement going on during the dream state. So is it fully unconscious? Yes and no. It's a hard question. And then there's 4 other states that I'm not going to talk about. But you can get to these 4 other states through deep contemplative work like meditation. Can you understand any books on understanding our dreams? Yeah, I have a lot of books on dreams. I will put those on the Heartland and the Dr. Yoga Mama Facebook page. So remind me, Kimberly, to put some book titles about understanding dreams on the Facebook page. Oh, Kim, this is such a beautiful question. What if your spouse is hurting and unable to transcend? His energy issues drain mine, causing my physical stress-related illness. But he's definitely, sounds like he's definitely a twin flame. But I'm hurting, you're feeling his pain as an empath. All right, Kim, I just want to take a moment to settle in with you on this question because it's a powerful one, and it's one that I know a lot of people are going to relate to. So often we are engaged in relationships in our life where the other person is really suffering. And this could be a spouse, but this could be a child. This could be a parent. This could be a dear friend or a coworker. And especially if we're wired quite sensitively, Kim talks about herself as an empath. An empath is someone who is a highly sensitive person that can literally feel the pain and the energy of other people, especially people that are close. So in this situation, it's very challenging because this other person's pain feels like your pain. The key phrase that is coming to mind for me as I sit in the depth of this, right? Like, I'm suffering because someone I love is suffering. I'm not able to really discern my truth or evolve in the way I want to because I've got this person in my life who I love, who in some ways is energetically preventing me from moving forward. And I get that feeling. Like, I get that feeling of like, I feel the urge to evolve. I want to grow. I want to like spread my wings and become who I am. But if I do that, I'm fearful I'm going to leave behind these people that I love, or these people who have a lot of meaning to me. So I could feel in myself that I want to talk for hours about this. So I'm trying to discern what is the most important piece to give to you today, Kim. And I feel like the most important phrase that keeps popping up in the back of my head is the idea of spiritual sovereignty. So it's the idea of spiritual sovereignty. So the idea of spiritual sovereignty is that everyone is here on their own journey. And yes, our lives intersect with many people's lives. We do have people we're supposed to travel in this lifetime with. But we are not meant to fix them, to heal them, to rescue them, to make things better for them per se. That each of us has our own spiritual sovereignty, meaning we are here to learn our lessons. And my lessons are not my partner's lessons or my friend's lessons or my coworker's lessons or my parents' lesson. As empaths, we often, and as people pleasers, we can get tied into, but I could see what they need to do. I just can see so clearly if they just start to meditate or if they just go to therapy, it could be better for them. But that's not our call, right? That's their call. So our work is to discern our own path, which means we have to go in and down. We have to go in and down. We have to go in and down to discern what does my spiritual sovereignty look like? What am I responsible for around my own life? And then what do I have to let go of in terms of this important person of my life? How do I give them sovereignty to make their own choices? Now, this is not at all easy because I can already feel Kim's fear around like, yeah, but if I give him spiritual sovereignty, he's never going to change. Maybe, maybe not. You don't know that. Our work is to listen to what we need and to follow that path, trusting that it's in the highest interest of everyone involved. And this is deep, hard, powerful stuff. So, Kim, I'm just sending you grace and discernment and really the power to sit with this idea of spiritual sovereignty. Can you give your partner the sovereignty to make his own decisions? And can you really honor your decisions and what you most need in this life? Hard stuff. Thank you for the beautiful question. I love challenging questions like that. Liz, the Joseph Campbell movie. Yeah, I think I saw it on I'll find it. I'll find it and I'll put that on the Facebook page as well. It was either on YouTube or it was through the Gaia. There's a Gaia sort of spiritual channel app that you can download that has lots of like beautiful spiritual movies. It was something like that, but I'll find it and let you know because I remember I have a memory of myself listening to it in my AirPods and vacuuming. You know how you have these, like how you hear certain things that are powerful and you remember exactly where you were? I remember vacuuming one part of my house as I was listening to Joseph Campbell. But I'll find that movie and let you know. I also see a really powerful question here by Mary that she might not be recognizing the call. There are a lot of weeds that obviously need to be cleared. Then will it manifest? Yeah. So Maggie, that is the work of going in and down. So going in and down doesn't mean that just suddenly like all our answers are there. Going in and down, we're gonna bump into things. We're gonna get stuck. We're gonna find constrictions in our bodies, constriction in our mind. We're gonna find emotion. Again, those are what we have to work with. So this program, Reclaim, and actually everything I teach is not a self-improvement program. Self-improvement programs are about adding things, like doing things, like, here are the 10 things to make yourself happy or to, figure your truth out. What my deep belief is about the human experience is that everything we need is already here. Like, we're not broken, we're not missing anything. It's all here. It's all here. Everything we need, all of our answers, all of our guidance. But we do have a lot of weeds, right? We have a lot of layers. We have a lot of things that we've heaped on top of our light, our truth, our soul, our answers. So the real purpose of anything I teach is essentially what I call the subtraction method. We have to let go. We have to keep releasing everything that is in us, everything that's in the way of us hearing our truth, of remembering who we are, right? So yeah, there's a lot of weeds for all of us. For all of us, there's a lot of weeds. And so that's the work, right? Continuing to shed, continuing to shed, continuing to shed. All right. I'm just going to keep answering these questions. I know more and more people will jump off, but it's okay. They're powerful questions and they're things that I love to talk about and love to sort of sit with for myself. So I appreciate the deep questions. All right, so Catherine says, on occasion, I get the sense that the people around me understand something about life that I don't get, that I'm missing out on something. This occurs outside of family. What is that? Ooh, Catherine, I would just say that sounds like a call, right? That sounds like some kind of initiation, right? So you have this deep sense that other people understand something about life that you don't get yet, right? So this feels like the call, right? There's something that I want, because what I'm hearing at a more meta level is there's something I want to understand about my life. No, we don't know if those other people have the answers. This is, I think sort of something we all do is we believe that other people know more than us. Other people have the answers. This gets projected onto me all the time as a teacher and as a psychologist. Clearly, you must know. Clearly, you have your life all worked out. Clearly, you know the answers. I'm always like, no. In fact, I try to be very transparent in how I teach and show that I'm as much on this human path as anyone else, right? I'm as much in it. Just really dedicated to the work and to the diving down under the surface to figure out what the unconscious wants us to know. So I feel like the call, Catherine, just based on this question, is that there's a call that there's something more I need to know. Now, I wouldn't assume that other people know. I mean, maybe they do. They know. This is the thing. Only you know your truth. Only I know my truth. This was a big thing for me, being a people pleaser and being someone who actually grew up with a lot of self-doubt for many reasons that I won't expound upon right now. I didn't trust my truth. So it took me lots and lots of years. I feel like I'm still sort of digging out of the hole of like not trusting my instinct. My instincts have been spot on for years. So part of this process is trusting and doing the hard work of continuing to go in and down to learn your truth. Because, Catherine, your truth might be totally different than the people you think in your life have it figured out, right? Your truth might look completely different. So that's our work, is to go in and figure out what's your unique truth. My truth won't look like anyone else's truth. But what I do know is this sort of heroine's journey and this process of going in and down will take you to a knowing. It'll take you to a deep knowing. Yeah. All right, y'all. Author of Hidden Blessings, Jet, her name is Jet, Jett. Saris, Psaris. Okay? So, great book. I highly recommend it. All right, everyone. Thanks for following up, Kim. It sounds like you are really listening to yourself and honoring what you need to do to listen to your truth, following your spiritual sovereignty. So that's really beautiful. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Lucy. Great to have you all on here. Appreciate your presence today. If you want more information about joining Reclaim, I think those are in the text box somewhere. Otherwise, you can go to my website, dryogamama, MOMMA.com. All right, everyone, stay well. We'll see you next month for Wisdom Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the month. And yeah, love to all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Lark. Mwah. Beautiful to see your name on here, friend. All right.